Salaam alaikum. Welcome to episode 7 to Muslim Billionaires Podcast. You guys already know the deal. Subscribe, follow all social media platforms of Muslim Billionaires. Continue to support this podcast. It's been amazing so far. And without further ado, I'm going to get into a very interesting topic that actually crossed my mind today. It's funny because sometimes before I even start a podcast, I always have these notes, right? And I'm always reviewing these notes, and then simultaneously when the day approaches where I'm about to record an episode, the time in between that is something just sparks my mind, and then I kind of, whatever I wrote down for that idea, I'm like, you know what, let's put that to the side, let's talk about this right now. And the thing that crossed my mind today, which today is kind of an example of it, is safety net. A lot of us approach life with learning about having a plan A and then having a plan B, plan C, and something to fall back on. And there's one side that says, your plan A is your plan B. And then there's another side that says your plan A is something that you're pursuing, but if it fails, you could fall back on plan B. Which side do I fall into? I say it depends, right? I think it depends on the person. I think it depends on the perseverance. I think it depends on the ability of what they're striving for. So I want to speak on both sides, but let's start with the plan A. That's the people that say plan A is my plan B, okay? Those people have a high tolerance of risk. They're willing to take any risk that comes with whatever their planning is, right? Usually those people they're in a younger stage, right? Moreover, when you get older, there's bills to pay. They may have families and everything, so they don't have the opportunity per se. Not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying they don't have the space to say, you know what, I'm about to take a risk. It's rare. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's rare. But for those that don't have a family, don't have kids, living in their parents' houses, say, and are put in a situation where they have the space to fail, then they'll take the risk of saying my plan A is my plan B. And this is when I say the case of those people, absolutely. You would have to take it. In actuality, I encourage those that are young to take risks, because your fallback is, I failed, but not anything's really dependent on me. I don't have kids that depend on me. I don't have a wife dependent on me, or vice versa. You know what I mean? So to me, taking a risk is one thing, but what a lot of people, when they hear risk, they think, oh, they're just shooting in the dark. The way I see the person that says, I want to use my plan A as a plan B, is the person that thinks, you know what? I want to take this risk, but it has to be calculated. See, there's a huge distinction between taking a risk and taking a calculated risk, because those are two completely different things. Taking a risk is just a shot in the dark and hoping everything goes well. A calculated risk, everything's calculated, right? If you really think about it, when we wake up or when we go to sleep, we're taking a risk. We don't know if we're going to wake up tomorrow. So from that point on, when we wake up, it's already a risk. When we step outside, is a risk. Everything else is a risk. Now, God has given us the choices and the mind and the intellect to start strategizing in how we can minimize the risk as much as we can. Obviously, everything's in God's hands, but God's also given us the choices to make sure we can minimize the risk. For those in a career path or looking at their potential, especially at a young age, I encourage those young brothers or sisters to take a calculated risk. It's fine. If you take the plan, if you have a plan, you put the effort in, you put the energy in, you delay gratification, you put yourself in a place of understanding and educating yourself so much because the foundation of what you're building is there's passion behind it. Your plan A can definitely be your plan B. Why? Because that mentality tells you that, hey, failure is not really an option. In actuality, failure is the thing that it's the thing that flames my passion, or flames that it's the connection between where I'm going to get to, or how am I going to get there, and the level of success I can get by failing. Failing is part of the process, as I mentioned before, but taking a calculated risk is a part of it. So having to have a plan A, but also falling back to plan B, is part of the biggest. It's probably the biggest thing you can make. It's a big decision you can make, and if you're young, I think you should do it. Now, for those that have, on the other side, for those the people that have a plan A and also have a plan B, again, it just depends on the person, right? Safety nets are interesting, right? Because safety nets can make or break you. A safety net, I'm not saying you shouldn't have a cushion, right? Anybody that invests should have an emergency fund simultaneously. You shouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. I agree with that. But simultaneously, you shouldn't be so cautious to the point where whatever the world or society tells you is where you hide into, right? You hide into this weird place that you don't even know yourself anymore. Rather, you have the world dictate what it is that makes you safe or makes you feel safe. But having the safety net without education is just being really, you're not really being mindful of where you're trying to get to at all, actually. Because there's no plan around what you're doing. Now, if everything is calculated and you do have a plan A and a plan B, I think you can start having a plan A and a plan B within the plan A that you have. Meaning, if, let's say you're striving to become a content creator, right? And something fails within your content creation or the process of you building something and you're not getting attention, there's not a lot of viewership or whatever. What is the plan B to that, right? What is your strategizing? What is your counter move to when you fail? See, that's plan B as well, right? But to say my content creation career is done completely is another thing, especially if you could take the risk, right? Again, safety nets are really interesting, but I just think sometimes it will take away what your potential would look like, right? I don't want, at least for me, I can speak for myself, I don't want to fall back into knowing that going in a place of my life in the next 50 years or something, asking myself, should have, could have, would have, you know, if I could have done this, and maybe I should have done that, and I would have done it. Like, these are scenarios that I don't want to play when I'm at an elderly age, you know? I don't want to play those. I don't want to answer those questions. The questions I want to answer are the questions I'm capable of answering right now, right? On the flip side of being or facing an older age and regretting everything I've done because I haven't done anything. There's an opportunity cost for everything. I think taking a risk also is not doing anything as well. That's also taking a risk. Why? Because there's an opportunity cost. If you didn't put effort in within those few years or that window that you had an opportunity of, you also have taken a risk as well. But it's not, again, but you have to ask yourself, was it a calculated one? Was it because of fear I didn't want to step out of my comfort zone? Is it because you're comfortable enough to say, you know, the safety net, the safe side over here seems really nice? Is it because these are questions you have to ask yourself before putting yourself in the deep end? Now, I agree, for those that are listening and have a mind for, how about the people that just go on the other side without even thinking? Well, I agree. There's an extreme side to everything, right? That side of, or those side of the people that decide to do that, yeah, they fall flat on their face because there's nothing planned behind it. A dream without a goal is a dream, right? So if you're not really putting any plans together or having any goals together, you're just entertaining yourself for no reason. It's just entertainment for you, right? I know somebody that talks, so much about what they're doing that they don't end up doing it. There are so many people, I'm sure we've stumbled upon it on the internet. There are people that just talk about what they're going to do more than they actually do it. Where years come by and you don't see any progress because, there's a safety net. They're just talking about it. There's those people too, right? You don't want to group yourself in where you have the potential and you keep talking about it to the point where it just becomes entertainment for you, right? It becomes so much of an entertainment that you tell people about it rather than actually doing the work. This is why I say working behind the scenes is really the true definition of independency, because you don't need validation and approval of what you're doing, right? So the conversation you need to have with yourself is to avoid the safety net in so many different ways. And again, one of the biggest reasons a lot of people have a lack of security of themselves is because they get too comfortable of having conversation that either distracts them from talking about their potential, or even if they do talk about their potential, there's no action that seems to be behind it. So to me, you don't want to be in that danger zone of forgetting who you are and what it is. I think there has to be something that you could do on the path that you're trying to get to, and you don't necessarily need to fall back onto plan B and plan C automatically. It's funny. Safety nets, right, can be bigger than the actual dream that you have, right? You're so anxious to know that something... Here's the thing. So sometimes we imagine ourselves as being the better version of ourselves. What happens when we start imagining ourselves as being the failure version of ourselves? The one that failed. What happens when we continue to do that? So we invest in our plan so much so to the point where you actually know that you want to fall back to your safety net. I knew that wasn't going to work, so I'm just going to go back into to falling back, right? I've seen this so many times when someone would motivate somebody about what they look or what they can build, right? And you see the resistance of not seeing their imagination. I always say the first step of self-development is accepting and believing there is a better version of yourself. And those that don't accept and believe, right, and you find somebody else, be a reflection of that and saying, hey, I think you have this potential. I know you can take this path. Shouldn't find the resistance to even have that conversation. You want to thank God to the point where you're open to knowing that you could find something about yourself that 99.9% of people are not doing. But safety nets, what they do is, or the safety net of what society leverages, is not only fear, but making it moreover of, this is a lot more comfortable for me. Whereas life is about being comfortable by being uncomfortable, or finding yourself being comfortable in the most uncomfortable situations, right? Those are the ones that succeed. There's value, an intrinsic value, for things that are completely unachievable, for those that think that way, that have safety nets from plan A, but there's plan B, C, D, E, F, G. That's not dreaming anymore. You're not even thinking about going beyond plan A, right? If you truly love what you want to do, as long as it doesn't compromise your values and principles, you don't want to limit yourself to knowing that you invest so much time in thinking about what the failure version looks like to you. Really. Because once you start doing that, you've already lost. It's like an athlete going into a huge game and their imagination is already thinking of how they're going to lose. Then you've already lost before you even started the game. Mentality is attached to what you're planning to do. If you cannot strive towards something without imagining yourself as being the better version of yourself, then you've already failed, right? Even if even if you're not getting viewership on your content, even if some people are not looking at you and they're laughing at you in the corner and saying, yeah, that person failed. No. Your success is knowing that you've already succeeded. I remember I talked about this in the last episode where I was talking about some of the most successful people are already 5 years ahead of their time or 10 years ahead of their time. So when they're getting celebrated for what they've done at that moment, they're already comfortable of knowing what the celebration looked like at that moment 5 years ago from that time, if you know what I mean. You want to be that version of yourself because they stuck with knowing who they could be and what it looks like for who they can be. I can dress nicer. I can act nicer. I can be more confident with who I am because I have purpose now. I know what I look like 5 years from now. Not too deeply, but in the back of my mind, you chuckle enough to know that I know what I can be, but I know what days it could take to get there. On a day-to-day basis, I like to put the effort in and see who I could become, right? But then you don't want to compromise those thoughts by having so much safety nets, by not only thinking because it's out of doubt for yourself, or having self-doubt, or that those self-doubts being curated or contributed by other people that have self-doubts too. You know what the interesting part of safety nets are? There are people that could create that safety nets for you, right? The same way somebody can help and contribute to your dream, it's the same way they can help and contribute to your failure, right? When you see that version of yourself already and people already contribute to that, it's over. You've lost. You've lost at a deeper end. And those same people are like, yes, they're on my side. Reggie loves company. We know this. If somebody's miserable with who they are and they've planted so many plants of safety nets, and all they know is what? All they know is this is how I like to be safe, then, and all they're going to look for are people that are striving for something and try to bring them to their level and saying, hey, you're not one of them. Who do you think you are? You know? Are your dreams big enough? That's something that I've talked about earlier. Are your dreams big enough for other people to laugh at and say, you're not going to get anywhere? Where they're affected enough to know that, hey, my safety net is being threatened by this person's dream? Is your dream that big enough? Right? Do you have enough foresight to know there is another version of yourself down the line, right, that you're fighting for and clawing for, right? And knowing that you cannot give up, right? But are you allowing other people to come into it with their safety nets and saying, hey, it's okay, I'm safe over here? You know? Again, let me be a little bit more specific with what safety nets look like. Safety nets, it's a mentality more than an action. It's you going into something already losing before you even strive to winning. Winning is a risk, but being too safe of something is also a risk too, and that's the irony of those that think that being comfortable in a situation is cool. You know, think outside the box. It's fine to take the original path of everybody else. Is a system that's already been curated. Cool. But learn about what the system of the path looks like, right? Having to be educated in a school to garner debt, to find a job, to continue to carry that debt, and to have an employee of a 9-to-5 and try using that 9-to-5 to pay off your debt, plus other consumer debt, plus the wedding that you've had, those wedding expenses that you've paid for because you got married to this woman that is contributing to that, and she also has a safety. It's just too many things that are just too safe because everybody else in the world is doing it. But when do you start asking yourself, before all that happens, am I comfortable and confident enough to stay away from this? And ask myself, am I comfortable and confident enough to know that, yes, I can be educated, but is there a strategy for me not getting into debt? It's the same because having an education system and learning about something are two completely different systems, different things, right? You don't have to be in the regular traditional educational system to learn about something. We have the internet to learn that, right? You can sit down, be disciplined enough to teach yourself about that. Not to mention, you have the passion and the fire to do it, so much so that you will wake up even earlier than the classes you were going to. But for those that are listening that dislike school, it's not because you dislike school of learning, you just dislike the system that's curated from a certain time period of the day to take away what your passions actually look like and what they're actually teaching, right? It's a safety net. But everyone that goes through that traditional route is so safe in taking that traditional route because everyone else is doing it. So what is that? How does that make you independent anymore? Does it make it? Are you truly to yourself self-sufficient enough to know that if I'm doing something that everybody else is doing, does that equate to me being independent, really? How do I call myself self-sufficient if I'm saying that? Right? So I just want to end this episode by saying take risks, take calculated risks, plan properly, talk to yourself, have ideas in place, get a whiteboard, write what you're doing, write your flaws, write what's distracting you, write what would contribute to what you're building. List out every single thing that you know you're capable of doing in that moment or the next week or the next few days. Figure out if you can do that, and then work day by day in figuring it out. And that does not mean you have to take the traditional route of what everybody else is doing. That does not mean you still have to have safety nets. No, it does not necessarily mean that. You could be protective of your dream, just in case. And when we get to the monetary financial planning part, right? Which, again, that's part of planning. It's not a safety net. Safety net is, I'm going to fall back completely if this A doesn't work. But again, it's all a case-by-case situation, right? If you're capable of going plan A without having a plan B, without taking risks of having children or wife, then do it. I'm a big advocate for that. But for those that are already struggling and being in that position, maybe the safety net is falling back to the safety net makes sense, and there has to be maybe a time period for that. I'm still pursuing your dream, but there has to be a plan within that. So, Assalamu alaikum. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I'll catch you guys in the next one.